Hey, are you and your team struggling with DevOps culture and practices? Well, if so, you're in for a treat because I have Tim joining us to talk all about it. If you don't know, Tim is the CEO and co-founder of Stellafai, which is on a mission to empower teams to go beyond task tracking and drive real outcomes. He has over 20 years of experience, and Tim's approach blends agile, lean, and intent-based leadership to build collaborative, high-performing teams. He's formerly the global head of products for Red Hat Open Initiative Labs and the co-author of DevOps Cultures and Practice. Really knows his stuff, and he really brings deep insights into creating cultures where innovation thrives and teams succeed together. You want to miss this episode? Check it out. Hey, before we get into this episode, I want to quickly talk about the silent killer of most DevOps efforts. That is poor user experience. If your app is slow, it's worse than your typical bug. It's frustrating. And in my experience, and many others I talk to on this podcast, frustrated users don't last long. But since slow performance is as sudden, it's hard for standard error monitoring tools to catch. And that's why I really dig SmartBear's Insight Hub. It's an all-in-one observability solution that offers front-end performance monitoring and distributed tracing. Your developers can easily detect, fix, and prevent performance bottlenecks before it affects your users. Sounds cool, right? Don't rely anymore on frustrated user feedback. But I always say try it for yourself. Go to smartbear.com or use our special link down below and try it for free. No credit card required. Hey, Tim, welcome to the Guild.
Thank you very much. Great to be here. Thanks for having me, Joe.
Yeah, awesome to have you. So this is something I'm surprised people still struggle with, and that is getting DevOps right or the culture right. So I guess to kick it off, like, how did you get involved in DevOps?
I guess I kind of got involved by accident. I didn't really realize it was DevOps I was doing. I go back to the early stages of my career. I was a graduate consultant for Big Four. I was being deployed into project roles, doing testing, doing code development, doing kind of whatever needed to be done at the time. And I find a lot of frustration in these huge, big, complex programs that I was helping deliver for clients. And there would be hundreds of people working round the clock, stressed, not happy, delivering late, delivering solutions which I don't think the client necessarily wanted, all the bad stuff, right? And then around about 2005, I shifted towards a much smaller consulting company. I worked on smaller projects, smaller ideas, and I happened to work with a bunch of software engineers who just had different ways of doing things. And actually, one by one, I realized that they were all really smart, common sense, really, and they were the solution to lots of the pain points I'd had before. So, for example, there used to be infrastructure teams, hundreds of people who would do overnight, releases, and they would manually run these things, and they often got things wrong. Where at the small boutique consulting company, the software engineers automated that. They wrote all this code, all script. Testing, it's my first experience of test automation. And I thought, wow, I think about being a tester and how laborious it was and how often I made mistakes. And suddenly every test was code. So I didn't know it was called, CI/CD or technical agility or DevOps. They were just a really smart bunch of practices that I slowly got introduced to. And once you've done that and you've seen the impact it has, it's very difficult to go back. So I've used them ever since, really, and I've just learned more and more ever since.
Absolutely. I love that. A lot of people, when they think of automation, like you said, they just think of testing. They don't realize you can actually automate a lot of the infrastructure and things that are slowing down your whole software development lifecycle. So this might be a dumb question. Is DevOps the continuation of Agile? Is it like the evolution of Agile, or are they two separate things still?
It's funny. I think a lot of the ideas in DevOps have been around for a long time. If you think back to the sort of the late 80s and 90s, extreme programming was a family of practices. And they came up with things like, pairing and collaborative development and test-driven development and continuous integration way back. And I think DevOps is kind of XP come back, but a bit more mainstream, a bit cooler. um, and of course, it's evolved with, what the capabilities are of technology, because back then cloud wasn't a thing, platforms weren't a thing. So I think DevOps has sort of become more powerful because the technology trends have allowed us to do even more and allowed us to go even faster. Um, and also, what I found was there was a lot of siloing of organizations. So maybe back in the 90s, early 2000s, there weren't as many sort of silos, but whether it's offshoring or starting to outsource things to different suppliers, naturally we started to build these walls up, and DevOps is now about smashing them down in a different way and getting the collaboration going again.
Absolutely. In in your experience, is waterfall still a thing? Because when I started, waterfall was a thing, and then
Yeah.
agile started creeping in,
Yeah.
and then DevOps.
I think it's still a thing, and I
Really?
actually still think it's a good thing in some
Yep.
cases. I look at I'm a big fan of the work of David Snowden and the Cynefin framework, and he kind of looks at the levels of complexity of work and the domains of work, and there is still a lot of work that sits in that clear, simple domain, and it is when there's a clear recipe and when, it's well understood, the knowns are all known. And in order to deliver the outcome, you follow these steps, like in a call center or a very procedural work. I actually think waterfall is the best way to design that because iteration doesn't really give you that much more value. It's not something continuous learning is so important because it's so well understood and known. Um, where I think waterfall it struggles is the world of complexity and complication. Where there are lots of unknowns and lots of learning that we need to figure out as we go along. And to me, that's where the power of agile, supported by things like DevOps, really really helps. Um, Now, in my world, most work is complex and complicated. I don't get offered that much simple work anymore. So this is, and I think that's why I naturally lend myself to agile. But absolutely, waterfall's a set of practices, and it's still the right set for some things out there.
All right, so I love that. It's you're not saying thou shall do DevOps and agile. It depends on your situation and your software development life cycle. How do you resist that then? How do you know what's the right thing to do?
You try it.
Right.
You try it out, and if it's the wrong, I've kind of come from a world where I was very wedded to frameworks. There was a time where I thought Scrum was the answer to everything. Then, I started to get tied to some of the scaled agile frameworks. Over the years, I've kind of decomposed, and I identify with a set of tools, set of practices, and what I think is when I tell a story when I'm teaching. When I hire a plumber to come and fix my toilet when it's broken, I don't tell the plumber what tools they should bring with them. I don't tell them, in order to fix this problem, I need you to bring this wrench and this plunge and this. So I expect them to have a whole set of tools in their van or their toolbox. And I expect them to have the knowledge to think, oh, for this problem, I think this tool will work. I think this tool will work. And they might be right. They might be wrong. If they're more experienced, they've probably got a good chance. And I kind of think it's a tool set is a little bit like, it's the same sort of thing with the tool set for projects and products. When you reach a context, you might have some tools that you think this worked really well in a previous context. I think this is a tool to try. I'm going to try it. If it works, great. If it's not, I'll throw it back in the box and I'll try a different tool. And I think all of the practices that we use in the world of agile and DevOps and lean and continuous delivery and design thinking, they're just lots and lots of different tools that you can try. And if they work, great. If they're not, let's try something different.
Love it, love it. So, I was thumbing through your book, DevOps Culture and Practice, and one thing I took away from it was you really emphasize the why. and
Mm.
using practices like the North Star practice or metrics. So maybe you could talk a little bit about why the why dramatically changes the direction or the success of a project.
Yeah, and again, this has come from experience. I look back on some of the work I did in the early stages of my career, and I was being dropped into teams and asked to, write some C++ or to write some Java, and nobody ever sat down and explained what the bigger vision of the product was that we were contributing to. We'd be writing some classes for a provisioning system, but the reason we were doing it was, so the client could launch a whole new marketing campaign or set of pricing plans or whatever it was. And one example in particular, I remember I was at the launch event, 18 months of hard work and getting a lot of things wrong. And at the big marketing launch event that we got invited to, I met some of the marketing people and I met some of the sales people. I met some of the product people who I'd never met before. And I suddenly realized how some of the things I've been writing code to were helping deliver this big, huge marketing thing. And I just thought, do you know what? If I knew that earlier, I just think that context would have really helped me on my way. If I'd understood why I was here and what problems I was trying to solve for the customers of this organization, I just think I would have, my understanding would have been that level up, and I wouldn't have made assumptions, and I wouldn't have, just gone with the flow, and gone down wrong paths. And I just think for everyone, it really helps if you can connect a little bit more to the purpose that you've been employed to do, the purpose that you are delivering outputs to, and you can start to focus a little bit more on the outcome that you're trying to help generate, whether that's through software, whether that's through hardware, whether it's through any other kind of output.
Yeah, I love that. I used to work for a healthcare company and for radiologists. And so we would get these designs from the UX designer. And what they started doing is having people go on field trips to these hospitals to watch a radiologist and work.
Yeah.
And they were able to say, well, this UX really doesn't match up with what their flow is. So they found things a lot, like these developers learned a lot from that. And I'm just maybe it's just because I'm in a bubble. I don't see enough people doing stuff like that. Do you recommend people focus more in on that as well to help them
Totally.
before they bake in their design to start going head down to actually experience what the actual customers are doing?
I think it's so. I don't think people realize the value of doing activities like that. And
Mhm.
your example, radiology. I mean, talk about purpose. I
Right,
mean,
right, right,
you and you're coding. You are genuinely helping save lives, right?
yeah,
If done well, right?
right, right.
And that's a reason to get out of bed in the morning. That's a reason to really, level up my motivation and experience. And if I can get out there into hospitals and see what, some of these radiologists are having to do, maybe some of the pain points that they're having to go through. And you're thinking, wow, just through my software, my UI, I can help them do more stuff quicker. I can improve the quality of what they're looking at. I can help them make decisions faster. And you start to connect the dots and think, I can help save lives. And I think if everyone did that just by having a bit of time to understand the context of the work they're doing, they're probably not going to, go down the wrong path. And B, that motivation, that connection to purpose is just going to be that extra fuel in your belly that's gonna get you going. So totally, I think it's such a good thing to do.
Awesome. Also in the book, I think you discussed the points of I think it's a three-step thing where it was people, process, and technology outcomes. Maybe what's this three-prong approach about?
Yeah, I mean, I got hired into Red Hat, about 7 years ago, and at that time I didn't know that much about Red Hat. I just knew that they were a technology company famous for being a Linux company. And the part of Red Hat that I was brought in to help establish was all about helping customers get the best out of Red Hat technology in this case. And often the technology is the easier part. You install it, you configure it, you educate and you train people to use it, which is great. But to really get the best value out of technology or products that you buy, it's often the ways of working and the mindset and the way people are working with other people in order to use that technology. So my focus was, yes, about great technology practices, test automation, CI/CD, infrastructure as code, everything as code, platform engineering, great enablers. But on their own, if you just go and do CI/CD in a silo, it doesn't deliver huge amounts of value. If you do CI/CD and test automation and you collaborate much more closely with business stakeholders and end users, and you introduce some processes and practices to get feedback loops going, and you start to bring more collaboration going and more safety for people to experiment and explore new ideas, those technology practices are going to be a hell of a lot more powerful. And I think that's where that blend of ways of working and practices, along with people feeling more comfortable and safe to collaborate and share and ideate and experiment and maybe fail. So that people idea with the technology enablers is an awesome cocktail. And that's when really powerful outcomes happen, when you get that cocktail of people, process, and technology working well together.
It's not, once again, it just might be my personal experience. I just feel people focus, you usually have people that maybe focus just on technology, or they're all in on process, not so much on people. So how do you incorporate maybe an open culture to get people front and center as well, not just the technology or the process that people tend to, from my experience, navigate
Yeah,
towards?
it's a good question. It's again and again, I think there's lots of tools and practices that you can try out. One of the things I love to do first with any new team of technologists and or business people, or ideally both together, it is to form a kind of energy within the team, a foundation of culture. I use a practice called the social contract, where the teams themselves kind of figure out how are we going to behave with each other. You think back to the best teams that you've worked in, maybe like your radiology team, and you think, what was it about that team that was so magical, and I felt so energized and loved working with the people I was working with, and what were the behaviors, and we try to codify that. Equally, what are the anti-patterns of the nasty teams, the ones where I dreaded going to work? What was it I didn't like about that? And I think that's a starting point of thinking about how we operate with each other, how we behave with each other, how we interact, how we collaborate, is going to be a huge enabler for success. So starting with something like a social contract and putting that up on the wall and people keeping each other accountable for it is starting to put people and culture first. And then secondly, putting a continuous learning and a feedback cycle in place about the ways of working. So, retrospectives will always be my favorite set of practices, because that is taking the time out and think about how are we going to get better to where we are now? What could we do differently? What do we want to do more of that's working well? What do we want to do less of? And some of those ideas might be technology related. Some great ideas come out of that, but often it's the people thinking, it's the way we're working with each other. There are things that we could do differently. And I think just setting the time aside to set up a team for success, and then putting feedback loop time in place so that teams can continuously improve is the way forward on that.
So this might be a controversial question. Can Agile work with remote teams? Do you think you have to be on, just throw everyone in one big room and hey, we're doing a stand up and we're all together, kumbaya? Is that always the way to go, or does remote totally not work?
Do you know what? It depends how fast you want to go. It depends how fast you want to learn. Can Agile with distributed teams work? Yes, absolutely. I've seen it work. I've been a part of that. In the pandemic, everybody suddenly had to be remote. And did Agile stop? No, I don't think it did. I think there were some great examples. I was pleasantly surprised by some of the stories I saw. But do I want to go as fast as possible. If that's the priority, I want to be able to learn and improve as fast as possible. I have always found working closely together and building that energy in a room together will be more effective. Um, so what I'm seeing at the minute, since we've all returned to work, and then there's this kind of hybrid world, I'm now seeing quite a nice pattern actually, where teams, the really high performing teams, are determining themselves when they're going to benefit from in person, in the room collaboration. So that might be, hey, for the first couple of weeks on this engagement or this, this area of product development, let's get in the room. Let's really align and get a shared understanding of what it is we're building, why we're building it, how we're going to slice it up, how we're prioritizing it. Once we get into our delivery sprints or our rituals, maybe we'll do the first one together in the room, but then maybe we can try, doing it remotely. We can figure out what is it that's we need to continue running, distributed. And maybe we'll get back once every couple of months to do an in-person retrospective. And I think, again, if the teams can work out when collaboration in the room is the best for them, whether that's certain hours of the day or so many weeks in the quarter, or a gathering once or twice a year, the teams will figure that one out, and it absolutely can be effective. And the great thing is there's so much amazing technology that can help us do that. I think if we tried to do this even 10 years ago when Zoom didn't exist, and bandwidth wasn't as good, and even now we've got things like VR and AR, all of this stuff, it's exciting because I think we're finding ways to keep the connections that are so important in high performing teams together, but finding new ways and experimenting new ways to do it remotely. So yep, agile can work distributed. But I still love working with teams in a room because I just think it's the best.
Okay, yeah. So your approach sounds reasonable. How do you empower your teams to make those decisions though, rather than top down? Like thou shall come into the office 5 times. Like how do you not damper your team's
Yeah,
the best way your team will
that's a
work?
good question. My approach to getting leadership and management on board and not going down that anti-pattern of thou shalt do this is to really invite the organization to experiment and try something new. So if an organization is quite new to agile, or they're trying to transform, I would say don't try and do this from the top. Don't try and change everything. Instead, let's choose one team, let's choose one product and one area of one product, and let's, just for a short period of time, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, let's try some new practices and new approaches. And you don't have to stick to them. We're not saying the whole company's got to work that way, but and often I'm in a kind of coaching facilitation role. I'm saying, can you trust me with the process here? And over the course of maybe 6 weeks, 8 weeks, I'm trying out some of these cultural practices, these foundational kind of empower the teams. Let's allow the teams to decide as much as possible. Give them some great technology tools. Let's allow them to choose the tools. Let's work, in an agile, iterative, continuous delivery way. And in that experiment, I'm looking for two things. One, I'm looking for a great story, a story that team can play back to their organization and show what they've managed to achieve in a relatively short amount of time, so that they can compare and contrast about how that would relate. And also really show the energy and the infectious enthusiasm. And then secondly, some mind-blowing metrics, and this is where some of the DevOps tools and DevOps metrics around, lead time and frequency of deployments and time to restore and fix problems. Let's get hard data, because leaders love metrics, they love numbers, they love spreadsheets. And I think those two things then allow us to have a really sensible conversation about, well, what are the magic ingredients that made that team so high performing to generate those mind-blowing metrics? And often I think the things that will come out as well, we kind of got out of the way and let the teams decide things like where they're going to work and how they're going to work and what tools they're going to use. So now we're in a much more solid foundation to have leadership discussions about, well, should we maybe start to think about changing some of our leadership culture to allow more teams in our organization to behave like that one, and keep that team going in that way. So proof point, mind-blowing metrics, great story, but do it in a very small space first rather than try and take over the entire organization and get permission just to try that as an experiment. That's been my approach.
Nice. How do you get these mind-blowing metrics? Do you see AI and machine learning being an enabler for agile? I know there's some software out there that can tell you, hey, this team every Friday checks in code that breaks the build. Maybe they need some more training.
Yeah.
Not to be punitive, but maybe just bubble up insights like, oh, okay, maybe this can help my team deliver faster because it's bubbling up insights that we may not even notice.
Yeah, I think I'm really interested by AI and how it can help teams. I know people are worried about it. I'm quite excited by some of the ideas or some of the conversations it could start to generate by surfacing suggestions like that. I have some pretty old-fashioned ways of doing, again, sticky notes on a wall. I love practices like value stream mapping and metrics-based process mapping, just to iron out where are the bottlenecks, what's taking long, what's inaccurate, where are we having to repeat and redo work, what would benefit from automation, almost, yeah, giving us a bit of a focus area for metrics-based improvements. And I think that's the starting point, because we get a bit of a baseline metrics and everything. And I love the Dora metrics, and there's lots of good thinking around good metrics to try and capture. So get some baselines, then continuously put probes in the system so we can continuously measure and show the benefit of trying some of these practices out, the metrics based evidence behind DevOps and agility. So it really will help with that kind of future investment. And I think AI. I think the interesting thing about AI, I always think about the teams where there's one or two people on the team who are just really good at throwing out suggestions and ideas and thinking, oh, I think we could be better if we did this, or have we thought about this? And where that person or people gets everyone rallied and excited to try something new, I think AI can kind of help with that. And of course, if you feed lots of data and ask, it might start to notice some things that our human brains don't think about. So, really interesting times ahead to see if AI can kind of advance those conversations and come up with some newer ideas quicker, which again are measurable.
Absolutely. What is Stellafai? I know you're a co-founder, but I'm not even sure. Maybe a little bit about your company.
Yeah,
why
sure.
You started.
So Stellafai is a company I co-founded about 2.5 years ago. The word Stellafai in the dictionary means turn into a star or placed amongst the stars. And the kind of the star system as a metaphor, we thought was a really good way to articulate the idea of connected outcomes. So I'm a platform team. I'm working towards delivering some outcomes that are measured. Those measures are connected to another team, maybe a product engineering team, and they've got their own outcomes which have got measures. And they're working towards, a more business-focused team who have got measures. And we had this when we had ideas around, the direction we wanted to take our company. We thought it's all about connected outcomes. It's about how do I get my needle in my platform team connected to my needles in the product engineering teams, and how is that connected to the business, and how is it ultimately connected to the strategy and the vision and the why, the purpose. So it's like a constellation of stars, and stars are bright when they're energetic and high performing, and the needles are moving all the time, and constellation lines. So there were lots of other ideas as well behind this word Stellafai. So Stellafai is a platform that allows teams to track their outcomes, their target outcomes, their objectives, how they're measuring progress towards them, and to be able to connect them across the org, so that you can see through a star chart how the work you do is connected to bigger purpose. And through the platform, teams can self-serve, but then they can also get help with a lot of these agile and DevOps and lean practices. That's partly done through AI, because we have an AI learning from, patterns of success, but also through myself and a group of highly experienced associate outcome coaches who can just check in little and often. So not like a full-time consultant, but like a coach in your pocket. So when you need a bit of help, a little bit of guiding, some ideas, our coaches do that. And we do it all through the Stellafai platform.
All right, so I may be off base. So I don't mean to go back to this example again. I worked for a radiology team. We had software that depended on third-party applications that were built within the company. The company was so big that, so does it help you know who your customers are, even if they're internal? That type of kind of tie-in?
Yeah. It can. I think it's anywhere where there's potential silos, there's potential dependencies. So it can be within one organization. So in a DevOps context, that would work. It can be, through a supply chain. While this supplier is helping this team, this supplier helping this supplier, ultimately deliver an outcome. It can even help, things like portfolios. So something where there's a common interest, a common purpose, and lots of contributions are needed from different teams, and collaboration and shared understanding and empathy between those teams is going to help deliver that outcome quicker or a better outcome. So there's lots of different use cases. It doesn't just have to be an organization. I think your example is great. We're bringing multiple people together and getting that shared understanding and empathy can really drive those measures forward faster.
Awesome. Okay, Tim, before we go, is there one piece of actionable advice you can give to someone to help them with their DevOps efforts? And what's the best way to find, contact you, or learn more about Stellafai?
Cool. So actionable advice. The first thing I would say for any team wanting to try this is start to put in a retrospective ritual. So just put some time in the calendar, scheduled every week, even for just 20 minutes, just to get together and think about what's gone well in the last week, and is there anything there we should do more of to make it go even more well? And what just one thing that we're going to do differently next week to make ourselves better, just to be even better. And that alone, with the looking at your infrastructure or your application or your technology, whatever it is you're looking, just putting that retrospective in place is just the first step, I think, but hugely powerful. And I would say that's the first step for anyone. Contacting me, I'm quite present on LinkedIn at the minute. You can find me on LinkedIn. TD Beattie is my LinkedIn handle, TDBEATTIE. And you can also check out Stellafai. So Stellafai is spelled STELLAFAI, and we're at stellafai.com. And you can try the platform out. The platform's completely free. We don't take any credit cards or anything like that. We didn't want that to be a barrier. So try it out. You can also chat to us through the platform, to our coaches. So feel free to hit us up there.
And we'll have a link for all this awesomeness down below. All right, before we wrap it up, remember, frustrated users quit apps. Don't rely on bad app store reviews. Use SmartBear's Insight Hub to catch, fix, and prevent performance bottlenecks and crashes from affecting your users. Go to smartbear.com or use the link down below and try for free for 14 days, no credit card required. And for links of everything of value we covered in this DevOps Toolchain show, head on over to testguild.com/P177. So that's it for this episode of the DevOps Toolchain show. I'm Joe. My mission is to help you succeed in creating end-to-end full-stack DevOps toolchain awesomeness. As always, test everything and keep the good. Cheers. Hey, thank you for tuning in. It's incredible to connect with close to 400,000 followers across all our platforms and over 40,000 email subscribers who are at the forefront of automation, testing, and DevOps. If you haven't yet, join our vibrant community at testguild.com, where you become part of our elite circle driving innovation in software testing and automation. And if you're a tool provider or have a service looking to empower our guild with solutions that elevate skills and tackle real-world challenges, we're excited to collaborate. Visit testguild.info to to explore how we can create transformative experiences together. Let's push the boundaries of what we can achieve.
The Test Skill Automation Testing Podcast. With lutes and lyres the bards began their song. A tune of knowledge, a melody of code. Through the air it spread like wildfire through the land, guiding testers, showing the secrets to behold.